Welcome to Down to Earth Astrology and Primal Girl Wellness. This is Miss Jenny and I am your astrologer. And today we are doing Astrology Investigates, the mystery of Kyrsten Sinema, sorry. All right, so let's take a look at what we have. Now this image, just so you know, that you're seeing here is referring to a photograph taken of Miss Sinema sitting in a restaurant just a few days or in the middle of yet more congressional things that she should have been involved in, and clearly has a very cavalier and dismissive attitude towards. And she was wearing a ring, and she knew the reporters and the photographers were there. And she held the hand up to her face, specifically so that ring was on display. And the ring basically said, off. Yeah, because this is what we have for senators now. All right, so let's take a look at what Goldilocks here has going on. And this is Kyrsten Sinema, who seems to have a predilection or a very strong taste for dressing like she just stole her little sister's wardrobe out of the, 21 and under shops. This particular photo, I'm bringing this up because the day she is such an attention hound. The day after Ocasio-Cortez was brought into Congress, and there was all this public frenzy about the new senator or new rep that was in office, that Ms. Sinema decided that the next day that it was important that she stroll down the hallways wearing her pretty woman boots and her short skirt, because Lord knows you should never forget that she's the prettiest one in the room. Oh, she's a piece of work. Okay, so let's look at her chart. So Kyrsten Sinema is a Cancer with a Mercury in Cancer. Let's see if I can get this to work. Her Sun is here and her Mercury is here. Now her Mercury is conjunct in the midheaven. This presumes that I have an accurate birth time for her. Libra is her ascendant, which means that Venus at 27 Cancer rules her chart. So the first things, before we get into the rest chart, the first things I want to point out, one, is that yet again, we have another 10th house sun. And remember, the 10th house sun likes to be large and in charge. They want to be the top of whatever game or group they belong to. The other thing is that with a 10th house sun, like most of your angular houses, but especially 1st and 10th house suns, these people have egos the size of entire solar systems. So people with first house suns operate as if the only thing that really kind of mattered was their place in the world and what they need and what they want. They have difficulty seeing other people's points of view. So the thing about it is, this is good because in some ways this helps you get further in life because you've got a very single-minded vision about where you're trying to go, and there's not a lot that's going to distract you from that. On the other hand, it can make you a little difficult to be around because, everybody has to, get in your jet stream or get tossed off to the side and basically left on their own to figure it out. Now, 10th house suns are very similar in that way. The difference is, and this is where we start getting into like where you need a better understanding and recollection of how these things, these signs and planets operate and what they rule. The first house is ruled by Aries. So Sun in the first house is literally the great I am. It's literally all about them all the time, the 24/7 me channel. They can be extremely charming and extremely inspiring because it's the first house sun. It's Aries, right? And Aries is very much about leading the charge into new and unknown frontiers. And also, there's a childlike quality to Aries that makes it very easy to forgive them over and over and over again for their rampant egomania or narcissism, depending on how you want to look at it. So they don't necessarily, first house suns do not necessarily mean ill or malice towards anyone. There's a very childlike preoccupation with self and what they need in the world, right? So that's the whole me first, it's all about me kind of thing going on with the first house sun. The 10th house is Capricorn's house, and here it gets a little bit more complicated because the game is a little more sophisticated. So 10th house suns, it's still all about the ego, but with a 10th house sun, they're very much about what other people think of them, how they look and where they stand in comparison to other people. So where a first house sun will barrel through life basically operating on a me first, it's all about me kind of tactic, right? Set of tactics. That 10th house sun is very much about getting people underneath them to push them up further. So they will create, 10th house suns will create a groundswell of people to push up their reputation. And also, and still, it's that same egomaniacal, it's all about me and what I want and that sort of stuff. Remember, Trump and Bannon, the charts we've looked at so far, both have 10th house suns. So does Kyrsten Sinema. So do a lot of other senators, because for them, it's about status, right? Achieving the highest level of status they can possibly acquire in this lifetime or in a situation. So they're all about themselves, but they're more sensitive to their relationships with the people around them because they're social climbers, or at their worst expression, they're social climbers. Okay, and this is Kyrsten Sinema. Now, with her Mercury is conjunct in the midheaven, so her communication skills are highlighted in this lifetime and will serve to benefit her and will be a tremendous part of her profession. With the Cancer emphasis, there's also the suggestion in anybody's chart, there would be the suggestion that people, nurturing people and taking care of people, you know, the whole motherhood thing would also be very integral to their work or their profession or their reputation or how they're known. Now, we know Kyrsten Sinema originally, back in the day when she had a conscience, was a social worker and then left to go into politics. So we're not seeing a lot of her doing anything that benefits people. And of course, you know, her whole platform getting into Congress to get the votes was about nurturing people and taking care of the community. And she has since turned tail on all of us. So, you know, we're definitely seeing that cancer personality or that Cancer style kind of blended in here with that Sun Mercury on the midheaven. Now, some things you should know about Cancers, right, that people don't often talk about. Like, we're always very quick to point to Aries as very selfish, you know, or Leos as very egotistical. And like, we're quick to point fingers at specific signs because the stereotypes are very easy. But one of the things that people don't think about or talk about very much, probably because they aren't paying attention to it, is that Cancers are tremendously selfish signs. So with Cancer, what you're going to get, as you will also get with people of 10th house planets. So 10th house planets, which is Capricorn house, and Cancer, the sign. I know they're opposite ends of the wheel, but they're the same in this regard. They're both prone to cherry picking. So with her, Sun in Cancer, Mercury in Cancer, Venus in Cancer, all loaded up in that 10th house, when it comes to cherry picking or picking out the best parts that suit you the most and leaving the rest to throw away for other people, she is the absolute queen of this. So it will be interesting to see as these things come out and we get more and more information, like how she has applied this to her fundraising. Because we're certainly seeing it in terms of her principles. Okay, now she has Venus in Cancer, and Venus is conjunct Polaris. Venus in Cancer conjunct Polaris, and remember, Venus is her ascendant ruler. So Venus, the chart ruler conjunct Polaris. Polaris is a fixed star that has to do with blindness. And also, it's not a great fixed star. There's a lot of negative attributes, disgrace, scandal, fall from grace, that come with the fixed star Polaris. So Venus conjunct Polaris also could suggest or symbolize that somebody who is blind to their own misgivings or poor choices and sets themselves up for a tremendous or great fall. Now, this is different than Regalis, which is 29 Leo. Now, because of the processions, it's now 0 Virgo. And again, folks, that orangutan that was in office for 4 years does not have Regalis rising, so just put that away. So with Regalis at 29 Leo, we're now 0 Virgo, there's also the suggestion of a fall from grace, right? But the difference is with Regalis, it is a speedy or fast ascent. So typically, when people do have Regalis in their charts, what you're going to find, even if they don't become kingmakers, you'll certainly find that with average everyday Jeans and Joes, that they do achieve some level of success and recognition in their lifetime. So there is always that moment where that realist, that larger than life and above the crowd sort of appearance, shines down on them, and they get accolades and applause and recognition for something that they've done that is outstanding and well beyond the group around them, right, or the masses. Their fall from grace typically has to do with, like Icarus, flying too high and too close to the sun too fast, carelessness, and also jealousy and envy from other people. This is different from Polaris, which shows a disgrace or a fall from grace because of poor judgment, blindness to your own bad choices. So she is flying high right now, and I wouldn't want to be around when this all comes crashing down. Now, she has the moon in Aquarius down here. Her moon in Aquarius is opposing Saturn. So we have a moon-Saturn sort of feeling here with her moon. Now, with a moon-Saturn, there we go. With a moon-Saturn opposition, especially with the moon in Aquarius, the moon in Aquarius is very cold, or not very cold, but the moon in Aquarius is cold. It's more mental. So they don't like, typically with moon in Aquarius people, they don't like big, wet, messy emotions. Like they run everything through their head, right? So everything's a calculation. They don't like sentimental, maudlin, like weepy, oh my God, like that's just not their thing. These are the people who go to romantic movies, right? You know, the romantic movies where people are crying, oh my God, like, oh my God, I can't believe, you know, like Pride and Prejudice or something, and they laugh, right? Because they think it's funny. So, so the moon in Aquarius is not a sentimental placement. It is not an overly emotional placement. It is definitely not a maudlin, weepy, soft, nurturing placement, in spite of the fact that she's got a lot of Cancer in her chart. Now remember that Sun, Mercury, Venus in Cancer, she presents as, you know, this very Cancerian woman, right? You know, you can come close, but not too close, and I don't know if I feel safe around you, and, you know, who are you really, and blah, 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 and oh, honey, here, let me take care of you, you know, join my safe haven. But the reality is that moon in Aquarius is calculating, and it's mental, and it's not doing any of this because of some sympathetic drive. It's doing everything that it does and presenting these things and making these offers to people because, you know, it serves a purpose. They have a vision. They have something that they can see. It is what is expected of them socially, right? So there's all sorts of mental calculations that go into these things. It's not driven by an emotional impulse. Here's the thing, though, with moon in Aquarius, and this is kind of interesting. Moon in Aquarius they're not robots. I mean, they are prone to emotional outbursts, but because it's a Uranus sign, right? With moon in Aquarius, what you get are people who are so hyper rational and so calculating and so in their head about everything and so avoidant of emotional indulgence that when they do have that moment where they finally like have to be human, they freak the F out, and like it's like a fireworks display of crazy. And they eventually pull themselves back together again and are quite embarrassed, you know, that they showed that weakness, you know, how dare you be human. But there are those moments when they will literally freak out like a crazy person and go banana boats crazy over just the most bizarre things, right? So it's only fun to watch if you're not on the receiving end of it. So, sorry, having morning coffee. So on the one hand, she's very good in groups. She's very good with friends. She's very good with arm's length relationships, right? In terms of very intimate relationships, very deep, close, face-to-face, one-on-one personal relationships, she sucks at it. She just sucks. Because you get this fluffy, bunny, mommy kind of presentation from her, and then you get close to her and you feel like suddenly you're at the Grand Canyon with a damn echo chamber around you because it's nothing but space and emptiness. So that can be very jarring, I would imagine. So she claims to be bisexual. I suspect in her particular case, she's opportunistically bisexual. And for those of you who are not aware what that means, it means that she is bisexual when it suits her. She's not actually bisexual. She's never actually going to have a deep, meaningful, emotional romantic relationship with a woman. It's typically when people are opportunistically bisexual, it's literally all about the sex in the moment. So they will have these relationships with women because it makes their male partners happy. Like, ooh, ooga, ooga, threesome, ooga, ooga. Ugh, God. Gentlemen, please put your penis away. Or they're bisexual in appearance because it suits their social purposes. Now, with her claiming to be bisexual, it's given her a lot of clout with the LGBTQIAZYBLGT, pick a letter from the alphabet, groups. I think it's LGBTQIA. I'm sorry, making fun of that. She's gained a lot of clout as being the first quote-unquote openly bisexual politician running our platform. They made a significant contribution to her getting elected. But I'm not completely sure that that's a genuine bisexuality as much as a mechanical bisexuality that's pretty much, based on opportunity and purpose, right? So it's entirely possible that this woman is a giant pillow princess. And because she allows women to touch her, she feels that she's got a right to call herself bisexual. Ugh. Anyway. Sorry, that really sticks in my craw. Be who you are and be honest about it. That's all I'm saying. Unless you're a pedophile, at which point you should not be who you are. And you should definitely be honest with yourself about it, that you should not be who you are. But that's a whole other conversation. Anyway, so with that said, in the marriage with her husband, especially with this moon in Aquarius and all these Cancer planets, one of the things that I would expect, and also that Uranus in the first house, one of the things that I would expect is that they have an open marriage, a flexible arrangement, but more likely an open marriage. And I don't imagine she's got a lot of deep, intense feeling for him, because she doesn't really appear to have deep, intense feeling for anybody. And she needs lots of personal freedom. So her husband would have to have and find companionship with someone, anyone, anything else, because she'll never be around. But with all that Cancer in her chart, she's not going to let him go. So, the thing with her is once you're like a true Cancer, once you're within reach and they've got you, you're never leaving. They will always have some type of string or tie to you, like a tether that never really lets you away too far. So they've always got one hand on your arm to keep you from getting too far out that door. It would be interesting to look at his chart. If I have time, I will, but he's not that interesting for me to pull up his chart. So I'm just saying. Now, with this moon in Aquarius, right, remember, it is opposing Saturn. So we've got this moon-Saturn thing going on. So here's the thing with moon-Saturn aspects. Saturn in aspect to Moon or Venus is extremely challenging because it chills or cools the very things that are supposed to be warm and vulnerable and open and giving, right? Saturn is not a giving planet. It's a Capricorn planet. Saturn is stingy. When Saturn is conjuncting the moon, it makes you very stingy with your feelings. When Saturn is conjunct Venus, it makes you very stingy with your resources, right? Trump had Venus-Saturn conjunction. He was extremely stingy with his resources, as well as his social approval, which is also Venus. In his particular case, and I believe he had it in Cancer as well. Yeah. Anyway, so that's where a lot of that self-absorbed, self-centered cruelty comes from with him, because everything in his life is conditional. He does not believe that anyone could possibly love him or want to love him unless he has something that merits their respect, or that they have an ulterior motive, or there has to be a reason they want to be around him. And it's not because of some generosity of the soul. Okay, that's what Saturn does. It makes you very tight and stingy with things. So Saturn involved the moon makes you very tight and stingy with your feelings, right, and your emotions. Now her moon is in Aquarius, which is groups, friendships, and associations. So one of the things that she would be very stingy with is her social connections. She would be very, very calculating and very stingy about who she shares her friends with, right? So I thought that was interesting. In a marriage or a relationship with this woman, she would just, it would be like having a relationship with a plank. like a wooden plank. Because again, emotionally, she's not really there. She's not a big, gushy emotion. Contrary to appearances, she is not a warm, gushy, emotionally generous person. She is calculating. She is intellectual about it. She intellectualizes her feelings. She does not like sentiment. She does not give from, an emotive, empathetic place in her heart. And with Saturn involved, it clamps down even tighter and makes her even more stingy and more calculating about these things. So, as a boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, wife, partner, whatever, like even as a pet for her, she's not a great bet to have as an owner. And believe me, with that 10th house Cancer emphasis, she does see herself as the owner of the people she is intimate with. So, her poor husband, right? Okay, so. And I know right now it sounds like I'm really just kind of bashing on her, coming down hard, and I am, because I'm really like most of America, I'm really upset about this nonsense she's pulling, this shameless money grab at the expense of her constituents and the rest of us, because it's literally shameless and in your face. So let me try and clean this up a little bit, because there are other people who share these aspects that are not her. And again, remember, astrology will show personality. It will not show you character, and your character defines how you use your chart. So the upside to a Moon-Saturn opposition like this is that you're going to get somebody who's very in control of their emotions. They're not sloppy with their emotions. So Moon-Saturn opposition, especially from Leo and Aquarius, you're going to get somebody who's a very controlled expression, very controlled demeanor. So this is not the person who's going to make a public scene. This is not the person who's going to break down in tears and boo-hoo-hoo all over the dinner table in front of company. This is not the person who will have an explosive outburst, on a regular basis. Moon and Aquarius will do it, but just not on a regular basis. Like once every 10 years, it'll happen. But they won't have that explosive, messy outburst on a regular basis, because, you've upset them, or this is a great opportunity for them to flex their power in a relationship, whatever. It's not like that. So if you need somebody who is in control of their emotions and like is a poker player when it comes to how they're really feeling, she is the one. This Moon Saturn opposition with the Moon in Aquarius, Saturn in Leo, they're the one. And this is further emphasized by all that Cancer, because Cancer, we know, likes to play their cards like a card game close to their chest, just so nobody else can read what's going on. So there's that. Now, here's what's also interesting. Cancer tends to be a very secretive sign. Cancer likes their secrets, and they don't like sharing with other people. Cancers are notorious for squirreling things away and not telling people, right? So whether it's, secret bank accounts they're not telling anybody about, or it's, love letters from 100 years ago they've got tucked away, in an incision in the mattress, or like pick something. They're really good at squirreling things away, like squirrels put nuts away for winter. So they're very secretive, which goes against this Moon in Aquarius theme, because with Moon in Aquarius is very out there and open. Like they're not very discriminating in terms of stuff. It's not that they overshare. It's just that they don't really see any benefit in lying or keeping secrets. So Moon in Aquarius typically, not always, but typically is a very bad liar. Cancer, on the other hand, is a very good liar. Cancer likes to keep secrets. Aquarius does not. So right here, we got a weird kind of dichotomy going, because these are literally, we're saying the exact opposite things about somebody who's carrying both of these traits in their personality. So one of the things that I would say, and then you've got that Saturn, right? So one of the things that I would say is that Kyrsten won't lie, but she will squirrel things away. Right? So she will keep secrets, but she won't lie about it. And if you pin her or corner her on something, she won't lie. She will divert and deflect, right? Or she'll sacrifice something else, from her big bag of secrets to hopefully get you off the trail, because she's protecting other things. That's how this particular combination of aspects would work, in my estimation. And remember, with that Saturn involving the Moon, right, and that Moon disposits all those Cancer planets, she is stingy as all get out. So she's got, she will hang on to whatever she gets, and she's not getting up off of any of it for anybody, right? It's like Daffy Duck in the cartoons, where he finds all the treasure. It's like, mine, 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 mine. Oh, mine, mine. So this is kind of who Kyrsten is. Like it's a challenge for her to not be that person, but her reflex is always going to be, it's mine, it's mine, it's mine, it's mine, and I'm not giving you any of it. You know, possession is 7/10 of the law, and I have all of it. Anyway, sorry. So if you, my friends, have a setup similar to hers, if you're born within a few days of her and you have similar setup to her, these are things you're going to need to work on in this lifetime. But you know that. You know that. Okay, so moving on. Now, she has Uranus and the North Node here together in that first house, right? So Uranus in the first house is always going to kind of give you a weird public image, or maybe not weird, unconventional. Unconventional. And if you know people with Uranus rising or Uranus in that first house, one of the things you're going to notice is that they're definitely a little different from other people because they think differently. Even if they don't physically present themselves in appearance differently, they think differently. They see the world differently. So sometimes they won't make sense because they're not in lockstep formation with group think, right? So for most people, they come across as weird, right? Dude, you're so weird. And it's not that there's anything defective about them as much as because Uranus is one of the outer planets and it's an abstract mental planet. So Uranian energy is detached from the current small world reality we live in and is looking at a much different, bigger or more abstract picture out there. And also Uranus, in the first house anyway, tends to make a person a lot more easily bored, constantly looking for more stimulation. But when they talk about stimulation, it's not stimulation just to stimulate yourself, right? So it's not like, ooh, titillating gossip. With Uranus angular, and especially in the first house, they need challenges because remember, Uranus is a mental planet and it's a higher octave, abstract, transpersonal planet, which means that these folks, as a rule, are, whether they realize they're doing it or not, are seeking stimulation in much bigger, more challenging ways that really get their brain to fire on all cylinders. So the local water cooler gossip is not, the coffee shop gossip is not enough. I mean, it's entertaining, but it's not enough. So these are the people who are often, I can't so here's the best example, right? So Mercury, which is the lower octave of Uranus, Mercury is like doing a seek and find puzzle, right? Where you've got to look for the words hidden inside the box of letters, right? To seek and find. And Uranus, which is the higher octave of Mercury, is like a Sudoku puzzle. The puzzle with the numbers, and you've got to fill in all the other numbers and get in a specific order. And by halfway through the puzzle, you're ready to tear your hair out and burn the book because you've got to, you've found yourself in a corner and you can't do it. And you've got to erase everything and start all over again, like that kind of challenge. So that's the difference between the two. So with her, that Uranus in the first house gives us an indication that this is somebody, again, who's probably very bright and constantly looking for some type of stimulation, but also, too, maybe prone to a bit of game playing. Because remember, this Uranus disposits that moon in Aquarius. The ruler of this moon is Uranus, right? And this moon is opposing Saturn, so she's not given to emotional indulgences, so she's got to get her excitement somewhere. Normal people, well, maybe not normal, typical people get their excitement from the emotional roller coaster we find ourselves on a day-to-day basis in our relationships and dealing with other people and watching movies and reading books. This is why we love gossip. This is why we love good movies that really get our hearts pounding, whether it's from fear or, suspense or, emotional drama, soap operas. We love this stuff because it gets us on the emotional roller coaster ride. And that is stimulation that typical people groove to. There's nothing wrong with it. This is what we do. This is our entertainment, right? This emotional roller coaster up and down. The other thing is with typical people, that emotional roller coaster we go on has a lot to do with our relationships. So this is the whole falling in love and the courtship roller coaster for people who are married and, not the best partners. It's the whole cheating and sneaking roller coaster. You know, for people who are not doing either and are just kind of playing the field, doing the, you know, round robin hookups, you know, like the Tinder dating, which I will never understand. Jesus. Again, same thing. It's that emotional roller coaster up and down, the anticipation, the suspense, da 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 da, you know, the angst, the disappointment, the frustration. So those emotions that we have as we go through these experiences is what we get our entertainment and stimulation from as typical people. When you have Uranian people, and absolutely with somebody with this Moon Saturn opposition, which has got like the Iron Curtain coming down on their emotional nature, they need other forms of stimulation. So with her, it would be more game playing, right? It's not going to be the normal stuff that we do. For her, it's going to be other things, right? And what those other things have a lot to do with how the chart is set up, which we're going to get into. But trust me when I tell you, like the normal stuff that we use for stimulation, the emotional roller coaster of dealing with people and stories and entertainment and relationships, does nothing for her. Literally does not. She is cold, 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 like somebody locked in an Iron Maiden, right? You can kind of hear the little muffled screams of an emotion trying to get out, but she literally will not let it out. Okay. Sorry, this really is genuinely and legitimately, this is an extremely tough position to have to live with. All right, so back to Uranus and Scorpio. Now, with Uranus first house, we just covered all of that. And also, too, I want to point out something here. This Uranus is opposing Chiron, right? Now, I don't use Chiron a lot in the charts because typically you should be able to get everything you need without Chiron. You should be able to get everything you need without pulling in all the asteroids and, you know, I don't know, Kuiper belt objects and good Lord, like pick something, right? Everything you need should be in the foundation of the chart. So that's why I don't use Chiron too often. However, this is very prominent and very important because Uranus is angular in the first house. It is opposing Chiron in the seventh. And she's already got a less than ideal chart when it comes to functional behavior in terms of normal, typical personalities. So, you know, we want to take a look at that. So the first thing, with Uranus opposing Chiron out of the first and seventh house, one of the things that I would look for is there's always, it's a perception issue, right? So there may have been learning disabilities when she grew up. There could absolutely be Uranus and Chiron. There's something there. There is something there from the early environment or childhood, and it's something that she's born with or grew up with that is a real problem for her. Or a point of sensitivity. We may never know what it is because these would be very, very deep personal things. The other thing is, if you look, Chiron and the part of fortune are together right here in Taurus in the seventh house. Now we're going to start pulling the signs in so we can try and make a little more sense out of this. So Scorpio and Taurus are both money signs, right? Scorpio is about other people's money and money that we owe to other people. And Taurus is about our personal money and what we have physically in our hands that we can make on our own. You know, it's self-reliance versus sharing resources to become more mutually reliant or supporting. Now, with Chiron and the part of fortune, right here, with Chiron and the part of fortune together, let's do that. Here we go. With Chiron and the part of fortune together in Taurus, typically what you get or can expect is somebody who in this lifetime is really sensitive and struggling with things that have to do with the value system. So people often think that Taurus has to do with money, but the reality is Taurus is about values, your personal values, and resources, your physical material resources, which also include people, but mostly it's the physical material stuff. So Chiron with a part of fortune in Taurus indicates that in this lifetime, working through issues that have to do with insecurities about material resources and the ability to have enough just to sustain life is going to be an ongoing, constant issue with her and for her. Now, we know that apparently her family was so poor, they were growing up in, at some point in her childhood, she was living in an abandoned gas station because her family was practically homeless. So it's not unthinkable that this would have played a huge part in her psyche and the development of her values in terms of scarcity mentality, right? Being afraid of not having enough, being terrified of being poor. You'll often see this kind of scarcity thinking with people who have Saturn in Taurus. The difference is with Chiron and the part of fortune together in this lifetime, she has the ability to make more than enough money to satisfy her security needs, her material security needs, but only if she does it the right way. Because Chiron is the teacher and the healer, right? So Chiron in Taurus would indicate that she has the potential to teach from her experiences about values and resources and managing them and what's necessary for just sustaining life. Okay. And I believe she does something, I think she's teaching a course in fundraising at Arizona U. Now, and here's the thing about that, right? Fundraising is an 8th house Scorpio function, not a Taurus function. So she's kind of sort of doing it, but getting it wrong at the same time. So Uranus in Scorpio, which is dispositing this Moon-Saturn opposition, right? If we look at that classic, so teaching is good for her, teaching fundraising, not so much. So with Uranus dispositing at Moon-Saturn opposition and her doing teaching classes on fundraising, what this would indicate is that, because that's a Scorpio activity, fundraising, she is operating from this Moon-Saturn opposition, this fear, you know, or her fears and her terrors about not having enough, and also, you know, this calculated move to try and do more in terms of building up her personal resources. So she's going about it backwards. But that's my opinion. I mean, obviously I'm not, you know, I didn't go from $100,000 a year to a millionaire, right? Having millions in the bank. But her story's not over, so don't get too distracted by what you see. All that is shiny and gold is not necessarily stable long-term benefit. All right, so this Uranus and Scorpio opposing Chiron and the part of fortune together in Taurus means also in this lifetime that money, literally just filthy lucre, you know, the material excrement that we trade in to get stuff done, money is going to be a giant driving force and issue and priority in her lifetime. Now, she could theoretically take the higher road, which would have benefited her more in the long run, and looked at more abstract concepts, right, that benefit the greater good, Aquarius and Uranus, you know, and found innovative ways to manage resources, personal resources for people, right, to help improve everyone's bottom line. She could have done that, but instead she is not, and she's trying to improve her bottom line by making calculated moves, right, and focusing on the Scorpio end, or the, you know, how can I get other people to give me money sort of thing. And that's not great either. So there's some of that. So if you're wondering what's driving this train, there's a lot of that. So it's not as much financial insecurity as much as just being stingy and having a deep internal wound that has a lot to do with personal value, which could also explain this obsession with dressing like a 14-year-old, right? So as a blonde white woman in this culture, in this country, in this day and time, youth is everything. So it's not enough to be blonde and white. You have to be young, thin, blonde and white to really have maximal value if you're part of that demographic. She is no longer young. She was never that attractive. The only thing she has going for her is that she's blonde and she's relatively thin. So in many ways, she's trying, this appearance of trying to hang on to this forever 21 look, which she clearly isn't, has also a lot to do with this psychological underpinning, right? This right here, this Chiron and Taurus, about personal value and trying to hang on to what she perceives as the only way she can have personal value, you know, as a woman in the groups that she belongs to, right? So she's trying to maintain the illusion of youth to retain her value to, you know, the interested parties around her, which is the other reason I say that I think she's opportunistically bisexual, because women who dress like this, this is clearly, aside from personal taste, this is also clearly an attempt to be appealing to straight men. Women are not women who are interested in women have a very different aesthetic when it comes to the women that they're interested in. And it's not universal and it's not one size fits all. Lesbians and bisexual women are attracted to things that are beyond physical appearance. So dressing like this is not going to get you dates with other women. I mean, it might get them to talk to you, but there's a lot more going on than that. So anybody who's, and especially at her age, for the love of God, like she is not 20. Right? Dressing like a 12-year-old. If she is dressing like this, and especially in that cesspool of testosterone that we call Congress, this is literally for the benefit of the men and her trying to retain her value in the eyes of these men. And also the donors, because a lot of the donors still, the people who make decisions and have the money to donate to these corporations, are still largely men, in charge. Okay, so that was my sidebar. Now, here's something interesting, right? So she has Jupiter and the vertex very close together, also in Taurus. There's a heavy emphasis on material resources in this lifetime for her. And this coupled with all this Cancer, which is notorious for cherry picking and hanging on to things, and very financially security conscious. Money would have been a driving force in every single thing she does. If she had not gone into Congress, right, I am sure that at some point she would have just found somebody rich to marry, right? Because she's operating for the lower end of this opposition. So Scorpio is about shared resources. Uranus is about unconventional things. Uranus and Scorpio is about unconventional sex and sexual arrangements, and she clearly likes to play the, I'm a hot blonde bisexual babe card. So it would not have been difficult for her to find a rich benefactor to marry her and basically put her up in a nice house and let her do what she wants, as long as she, provides the girlfriend once in a while. So the vertex and Jupiter together in Taurus further reinforces and emphasizes this drive for material security. Now, Jupiter in Taurus, if you have Jupiter in Taurus, here's some things you should know, right? Jupiter in Taurus, from what I understand, typically does not see a lot of material benefit or security until after, ready, wait for it, after the age of 50. I know, right? Now, if you are doing very well and you're under 50 and you've got Jupiter in Taurus, and hats off to you, but for the rest of you who are still kind of struggling and mucking along, it's not you, it's Jupiter. So Jupiter tends to kick in about midlife, and Taurus is about financial security and material resources. So Jupiter in Taurus kicks in usually about midlife. So many of you out there may be not seeing financial security or even material security, right, until midlife. And it's okay. It's okay. Just hang in there and keep moving in the right direction. Now, her vertex is at 20 Taurus, and it's very close to that Jupiter. So the vertex is the point of fate. And what they say about the vertex is that when something crosses the vertex, things that are well beyond your control occur, good, bad, and different. Like the fickle finger of fate is absolutely operating with vertex, and it's like a spider web. Once you're caught in it, you can't get out of it. So if that is the case, and this is how we're reading the vertex, that vertex with that Jupiter in Taurus means that anytime that Jupiter is activated, the vertex is also being activated, which means that anything that has to do with financial security or material resources for her becomes a bit of a spider web. So it's not that there's a catch involved, like there's not this hidden string that's involved in order for her to get what she's being given, as much as things are often much more complicated than they appear to be in terms of whatever it is she's receiving that looks like a blessing at first and turns out to be a whole set of considerations afterwards. Also, too, it will be very difficult for her to get out of. So the problem with her is that unless she's operating from a very high road and really making, and remember, Polaris is blindness. She doesn't see things, right? Polaris is conjunct Venus, which is money and financial resources and values, and Polaris is blindness, so she's blind, or has definitely difficulty seeing clearly things that have to do with values and her value and other people's value and things of value, which will present portend to be a downfall for her. So with with Vertex and Jupiter and Taurus together, things that she gets that seem to be a benefit, especially as she gets closer to midlife, may look very valuable and very beneficial, but will often turn out to be like a spider web she's found herself caught in that she now can't get out of. So things are more complicated, more tricky, and possibly even more detrimental to her. You know, it's like literally the world's biggest catch-22, right? In terms of what she gets, unless she's really making an effort to operate from a high road. And even then, it's still going to be problematic. The difference is, how problematic are we talking here, right? So I'm not sure how old she is. Wait a minute, 70. Yeah, see, she's heading into midlife right now because she's born in 76, 78. So she's in her 40s. She is heading into midlife. So this Jupiter is getting ready to well, it probably is right now. It's kicking in right now. But again, all that looks good on the surface, all that looks like gold is not really gold. So she's raking in a lot of Jupiter and Taurus material benefit, but that vertex is sitting there like a spider web, and this has not played itself out yet. So she may find herself entangled in impossible situations that she cannot remove herself from. So it's like the devil's gift, right? The devil will give you anything you want, but there's a catch. And that's this Jupiter Vertex conjunction, and especially in that 8th house, which is shared resources, support from other people, funding from other people, all this Scorpio stuff that we were talking about, like she's teaching down at ASU for fundraising, right, which is all Scorpio. This Vertex and Jupiter sits right here in her 8th house of financial support from other people, which would represent donors. Anybody who gives her money or assistance or support to help her live or achieve her goals that she has to share a commitment with, right? Whether it's a husband or a financial donor, this is where that Jupiter Vertex sits. So she's really, if she is accepting money from other people, there are a lot more considerations here than she's seeing because she's blind. She's not seeing it. And they're not going to tell her either. They're just going to let her walk into it. So this is not promising. This is not promising. For those of you out there who are really wound up about what this girl is doing, like many of us are, it's okay. Like this is clearly a big cosmic play, moral tale that is being played out right now. So pull up a chair and get some popcorn because it's not even close to being over yet. This will not end the way she thinks it will. I promise you that. Oy. Okay, now she has Mars in Virgo. I know, even all around the circle here. So she has Mars in Virgo, and Mars in Virgo is also a very cold placement. People with Mars in Virgo are generally happier when they're working. They're also, well, I don't want to say that they're hypercritical, but they can be a bit of fuss budget, and they do have very specific standards. And there's a lot of nervous energy with Mars and Virgo. So if they're not busy doing something, they tend to be really difficult to be around because oh God, they can complain. Death by 1,000 paper cuts. That's Mars and Virgo. Now with Mars and Virgo and that Moon Saturn opposition in Aquarius and Leo, again, there's a lot in her psyche that's just shut down. Like this woman is emotionally shut down under lock and key. So in terms of an intimate partner, thank God she doesn't have children. You know, but in terms of marriages and friendships and all sort of stuff, like she's cold, she's calculating, there's just not a lot going on in there because she is locked down tighter than Fort Knox. This is not a healthy disposition, and this is something she would have to work through in this lifetime in order to get away from all this and get the best out of her chart so that she's not, you know, back on the karmic wheel over and over and over again with this. With Mars and Virgo is also the perfectionist. Now, here's the thing I want you guys to understand about Mars and Virgo also. Mars and Virgo is the servant, right? It is the fixer, the problem solver. When you have people who have Mars and Virgo, one of their first inclinations is typically, how can I help you? What can I do to help? How can I help fix this? They will help and focus on streamlining things and improving the conditions of things. That's what makes them the happiest and where they use their energy the best. They could easily use it for, I don't know, perfectionist things like perfectionist appearances and all sort of stuff. But ideally, you know, it's very much about of being of assistance, because that's the whole Pisces Virgo axis, to serve and or suffer. So Virgo and Pisces, strong and emphasized in a chart, means that there is, in order for you to get the best out of this, there's a part of you that has to be willing to relinquish your ego for the greater good. You have to be willing to be of service to help alleviate the suffering of other people in order to get the best out of the energy from these signs. Now, with her Mars and Virgo, the drive should be to help alleviate and end the suffering of other people, to help improve the conditions, right, of other people or the people around her or situations, because that's Virgo. Clearly, this isn't, she stopped doing that when she left social work, which is very much a Mars and Virgo sort of thing. And when in the politics, somewhere in here, she's made a switch and she's fallen into this heavy, you know, Saturnine, Taurus, Scorpio stuff and lost the plot, right? So she is no longer doing anything to help alleviate the suffering of other people. She is absolutely doing everything she can to pad her own bank account and make her life as physically comfortable as possible, right? And to hell with other people's needs, because it's all about her. So that is unfortunate. That is unfortunate. Now, so the thing about it is when you look at a chart, right, you look at this stuff, the other thing to keep in mind is that, well, I mean, you're born with what you're born with, right? You're born the way you look, the height you're going to be, like the number of teeth in your mouth and the way they look, like your bone structure, the parents you get, the place you start out at. You are born with these things, and there's not a lot you can do to change it, because you can't go back into the womb and start all over again. So you got to take what's in front of you and work with it. And the chart is kind of the same way. We are born with the charts that we're born with. So ideally, we want to look at our charts and figure out what is the best possible way I can utilize these things, work through my limitations, right? And, you know, find the best possible expression to kind of get through this, right? Because ultimately, if you are doing the best possible expression of yourself, you're going to be happy because you're being authentic to yourself and you're going to get rewarded for being yourself. Who doesn't want that? So in her particular case, she's definitely not doing any of these things right now. And I'm not completely sure what's happened, and we're going to get into that in a second. And but suffice it to say that she has taken the turn down the path, the left-hand path, and she's heading in directions she does not realize she's going. All right, and we're going to kind of finish up the chart here so we can get on with the other stuff. So a couple of things. So Mars is in wide square to Neptune. I'm not fond of using wide orbs. I like the aspects to be a little tighter and closer together. But with Mars and Neptune, if we include this as an aspect, if you allow a wide orb for this, Mars and Virgo squaring Neptune and Sagittarius, again, it's this business about being misguided or confused or lost most of the time, right? So with Venus ruling the chart, conjuncting Polaris, which gives us some blindness, right? Some, you know, lack of vision. And Mars squaring Neptune, which has everything to do with direction that we're going in, being very easily led off course or never really being sure what direction you're heading in, kind of off in 12 different directions. It becomes a very Piscean sort of Mars at that point. This does not promise very good things. So she literally may have been off in her own little la-la land or taking the advice of people who don't have her best interest in heart and are using her as a sacrificial lamb. And this would have been a long-term game, right? So there's that. Her judgment's not the best. And also too, with that Mars-Neptune, if we're using this as an aspect, with that Mars-Neptune, again, Pisces, Virgo, serve or suffer. In this lifetime, this was supposed to have been about her working towards alleviating the suffering of other people. That's what it was supposed to have been about. We don't know what's going on with her right now. We're going to look into that, but she's totally missing the boat if what we're seeing is correct. Now, just one final note, and then we're going to move on to the next screen. She's got, remember this stingy, cold Moon-Saturn opposition with Moon in Aquarius. Now, her Pluto is behind the ascendant. It's not close enough to use. I won't use it. You can, but I won't. But the moon makes a nice trine to that Pluto. So the thing about it is with Pluto, when you see Pluto in a chart connected to especially personal planets, what you're going to get is somebody who has it's almost like a sex appeal, right? There's this intensity that kind of bubbles up underneath the surface. You get a sense of when you're around them. With that moon, and also too, Pluto has a lot to do with support from other people. So moon enshrined Pluto like this, especially from the 4th to the 12th, would indicate that she would naturally draw to herself support from very large or well-funded sponsors, whether it's a husband or a financial group or a political PAC, whatever you call it. And also too, because it's in the 12th house, these would all be backdoor dark, what they call dark money, right? These would all be hidden things. So there's all sorts of hidden stuff that goes on in terms of the support that she does get. And this coupled with this that we were just talking about, or not this one, sorry, it's this, right? This business about everything's a spider web. So she'll get all these great things that look great on the surface in terms of benefits, but what she'll find herself caught in is a spider web she can't get out of, where she is, going to be the sacrificial lamb. So there's more of that, or more emphasis on that. Okay. Now, one of the things, before I leave, just one of the things I want to point out. Now, her midhaven, which is the career, is Cancer. It is ruled by the moon. That moon is here in the 4th house. So families, right? Families and home and motherhood, all of these things should have been major focuses and priorities in her lifetime, especially where her career is concerned. She should have been, or she not should have been, she would have found herself in the position, no matter what her job was, where she would have been able to be an advocate and be of assistance and spearhead change and progress and protection for families, children, motherhood, right? The family, all these things. And I don't, at some point we'll go back and look at her history as a social worker. And I imagine as a social worker that this absolutely fit that narrative perfectly. And as a senator, she would have had even more power and ability to do more of that good work, right, which she was supposed to be doing this lifetime. And at this particular point in time, she's literally doing the exact opposite. She is throwing families and children, and older people, all this stuff, and domestic things, all these things are important, like literally throwing them all under the bus for personal gain. So that's a little confusing, but suffice it to say that the cosmos is paying attention, and sometimes you get a pass-fail test, and she's checking off her little checkbox on the test. She's not doing well right now, so she will not be getting a passing grade at this point. Okay, so one of the things that we were looking at is the 10th through the 12th were big days for her, right? Spankings all around for everyone, and we didn't hear anything. And again, remember, when we're talking about public figures, we only get what the news outlets can find to give us. So because we don't live or travel with her, we have no idea what's actually going on a very direct level with her. Now, so I went back and pulled up the days around the time that she took off to Europe, because apparently when the 10th, 11th, 12th is Senate session ended, and she flew off to Europe inexplicably. So here are the aspects that were occurring around that time. The first thing is we have a quarter moon that's occurring, right, as this is kicking off, that is pulling in those 10th house planets of hers. So remember, quarter moons are decision makers, and this particular quarter moon was absolutely about making, like, cut the crap, make a decision, like, get on board now, right? It's very much about being accountable or being held accountable. Now, this particular quarter moon, if you look right down here, this one, right? It is near, it's not on it, but it's near the Pluto, which is, oh, hang on a second, the transiting Pluto, sorry, right. Because remember, we were saying this quarter moon is like a cut the crap quarter moon because it's involving Pluto, right? And in her particular case, this quarter moon pulls in those 10th house planets, those 10th house Cancer planets. So for whatever reason, this impromptu trip to Europe was not an impromptu trip, but may have actually been her being called to the carpet to answer to somebody. So I don't think this was about fundraising or What is word I'm looking for? I don't think it's about fundraising or a pleasure trip or her going because this is going to be a great thing to do and she couldn't be in Arizona. I think this has a lot to do with her answering to people as well as some other things. Very much a cut the crap kind of moment. So there was that happening. The other thing that was happening is the progressed sun in Midhaven were applying to her Mars. So right now, with its sun approaching Mars, it's giving her a when your progressed sun hits your Mars, a couple of things happen. One, you become more aggressive because you become more confident in your ability to get stuff done, right? So this could be a good thing or it could be a bad thing depending on what your natal Mars is actually doing. With the progressed sun approaching her Mars, also men, and especially men in positions of power, will become very highly focused in your life. So with the sun in Midhaven by progression approaching her Mars, and her Mars is in Virgo, I would expect a potential combination of all of these things. And this is all kicking in at the time that she flew off to Europe this last week. Now, interestingly, Virgo, by the way, in case you didn't know, Virgo rules drugs and medications. So it's no accident that Roche Pharmaceuticals, which is a huge fund supporter, a huge financial supporter of hers, donor, huge donor, is located out in, I believe, France. And there's another one right there in Switzerland. I just read this in an article, so this is important. So she may have been called out to Europe to answer to her masters because there was no way anybody was going to come near her in the United States given the constant harassment and public cry for attention from her constituents across the country she's been getting. Nobody with any kind of money and things to do wants any parts of that. So those two things may be the reason she flew over to Europe at this time. Now, the other thing I thought was interesting, remember, the green planets are progressed planets. So her progressed Moon, Venus, Mercury, Mars, they are all together right now in late Virgo. Right? I think Mars is actually in early Libra. So she's got all this, well, serve or suffer, right? So this is a time when she's supposed to be getting her act together. Now, these progressed planets are making a sextile to her natal 10th house planet, so her career should be doing really well right now. And, in some ways it is, in some ways it isn't, depending on what her career goals are, right? In terms of being a senator, she's totally, screwing the pooch on this. But in terms of long-term goals, if her long-term goals are not to be a senator, but to be something else, then she may find herself receiving all sorts of opportunities to advance those goals. We don't know because we don't have access to that information, but time will tell and the truth will come out. Now, with this said, look at this. Transiting Neptune is opposing those progressed planets in Virgo. So she's not seeing clearly, she's not thinking clearly, things are not being presented to her clearly. There's a whole lot of not everything is what it appears to be going on right now. And given her propensity to not see things clearly to begin with, because we just went over that in the natal, this is not a good combination to have. And in times like this in your life, this is an important time to have really solid advisors and friends who are looking out for your best interest and to do a lot of soul searching and meditation, because nothing is what it appears to be and nothing is clear. Everything's as clear as mud. Now, this transiting Neptune is, in fact, trining at the same time those 10th house Cancer planets. So Neptune also rules charity, and surprise, guess what Neptune rules? Drugs. Virgo rules medications and also therapies and medicine, right? Neptune absolutely rules drugs. So with Neptune trining those Cancer planets in her 10th house, it is quite fitting that the symbolism here is big pharma, drugs, medications, is absolutely propping up and supporting her career right now. But remember, she's, that Jupiter vertex in the 8th house, like her beneficial rewards aren't always what they appear to be. It's a bit of a spider web. So they're giving her a whole lot of stuff, but that's just for the here and now. The long-term ramifications of this for her personally is going to be much bigger and much more dire, and certainly not something she's going to be able to see on her own. And these are the auspices under which our Miss Sinema flew off to Europe to meet her masters. Now, we were told that she was going to London and then she was going to Paris. And later, it's in another article, they talked about Roche Pharmaceuticals and I think another drug company that are huge donors of hers. One is located in Paris, or in France rather, and the other one is located in Switzerland. So I think London may have just been a stop-off point to enter Europe. I don't think there's anything in London that she needed to see. Now, these two charts, this one is Paris and this one is London. So we've done a relocated chart for her in both of these places. You know, the idea with relocated charts is that where you move has a lot to do with what side of yourself becomes presented to the world, right? Different places bring out different parts of yourself. People who are happily married can move to the other side of the country and then within months find themselves arguing and bickering constantly and getting divorced, where, you know, 20 years before now, like they were getting along fine. People who are not doing well, who feel like outsiders, who, you know, are misfits and just can't quite get it together in one area, may move to another place and suddenly find themselves catapulted, you know, into stardom, or, you know, find themselves really flourishing and thriving. People who do really well in one area may move literally like one town over and suddenly find that everything falls apart. The location you're at, because it is an environment with its own personality and its own subculture, absolutely has everything to do with how well or weakly you will fare there, right? Now, astrologically, we do this as a relocation. We believe that when you set up a chart and you move it to somewhere else geographically, that because you don't change, you are always going to be who you are, for better or worse. But when we physically move you, different parts of your personality and different parts of your life experience may come up to the surface and become more prominent and dominate the day compared to living somewhere else. So that's what relocation charts do. It is not a guarantee that moving somewhere else is going to fix your life, because ultimately you are still who you are and you have to work on, you know, your stuff. But what we can do with relocation charts is certainly avoid sending you to places that are going to be absolute poison for you, right? So unfortunately for me, all of my best lines are in the middle of the ocean. So clearly I'm supposed to be working on cruise ships, except I can't swim. Anyway, so the reason I put these two charts up is to show you that there's really not a lot of difference between the two locations. So we could have used either one of these, because the chart positioning is going to be identical, and the difference is going to be an ever so slight shift in the angles. Okay, now she carries natal Pluto at 9 Libra. Okay, so in the chart for France, 9 Pluto is back here in the 8th house. Not really a big deal. Oh, wait, what was I looking at? No. I'm so sorry. Skip what I said about Pluto. We're not worried about Pluto right now. Sorry, it's this. So for the France chart, we have 15 Scorpio rising. I think that's what it is. Or 12. But in either event, Uranus and the North Node are not that close to the midheaven, so they don't really come up very strong or prominent. So there's nothing particularly interesting happening in France, which is good. Sometimes, like if you're traveling, you really do not want interesting things to happen. However, if you look, that vertex, remember that vertex is the spider web, right? Not everything you see is what it appears to be. Fickle finger of fate and all that sort of stuff. That vertex is very close to the nadir of her chart, or on an angle, which means that vertex comes into play very prominently. So something associated with France is going to make that vertex that we just talked about, the vertex, Jupiter, spiderweb, material benefits not being what they are, or appearing to be at first, absolutely comes into play in France and things associated with France. So if I am remembering this correctly, and it's Roche Pharmaceuticals, and they are her donors sitting in France as she went to go see, they may or may not have given her money, but also too, this is absolutely coming to answer the call of your masters. So like Bannon is going through some stuff where he's got to make himself accountable for not living up to his promises to somebody that you don't want to break promises to. This is the same thing for her. Her going to France has less to do with fundraising and more to do with her answering to her masters about what she is or isn't delivering and what her next steps need to be. Yeah, right? Vertex. Woohoo! Okay, now if we go to England, the angles are pretty much the same, right? So it's 10 Capricorn here and it's 4 Capricorn here, so it's about 6 degrees difference. But the midhaven for England now becomes closer because the midhaven is 10. Her north node is at 9 Scorpio. So it is entirely possible that while she is in England, someone or something she may have come in contact with that opened the door of opportunity for her in terms of new fundraising or financial sources moving forward. But this is the one to watch. So, and also again, I'll find the article and link to it. Roche Pharmaceuticals comes up as associated or based, the owners are based in France. So there's something specific, I would bet you good money, there's something specific about them, that company, their donations, and her as her owner, right, as it were. That's really, really prominent in what's going on in this bizarre behavior that she's doing. Now, with relocated charts, it gets kind of interesting, right? Because what happens is as you move, give it to me. No, try this one. There you go. As you move east or west, or you move north or south, the wheel is going to move, right? So in this particular case, we just looked at England and we just looked at France, right? And if we push her chart over to Germany, now mind you, while we're doing this, Switzerland is right there. If we push her chart over Germany, what's going to happen is the angles on the chart are going to change because this is still her chart. It's just we move stuff around. But look at what happens. That natal Jupiter and vertex of hers moves almost exactly onto the nadir, which makes it extremely prominent because now it's angular, it's on an angle. This vertex is at 20 Taurus because the vertex is just before, just before that Jupiter. So these things are very close together. You're going to get them both. And the midhaven in the relocated chart for Germany, or Munich rather, okay, is going to set up shrines to those her Cancer planets, or 10th house Cancer planets. So somewhere closer to here, get this out of here. Somewhere closer to here is going to activate this vertex and that shrine, right? Well, I'm going to bet you that it's not actually the capital of Switzerland, but right over here, the the eastern side of Switzerland, closer to Munich, is where this really activates. So and I'm pretty sure one of the pharmaceutical companies is also there in Switzerland. I think I just read this today. So we'll take a look at that. But if that is the case, then that absolutely further reinforces this suggestion that there's something going on here involving that spiderweb trap she's falling into, or could fall into, when it comes to material resources and support. With all of this trying to that midhaven, anything going on around here, which is Munich and Switzerland, right? Anything happening in here will absolutely appear to be to her benefit, right? So there will be a lot of benefit and support for her in this area and from people in that area. The problem for her is that she's got the world's biggest catch-22 in her chart, and that's that Jupiter vertex in the 8th house. So she may get lots of support and enthusiastic, benefit from people in these areas or associated with these areas, but that doesn't mean that it's not going to come without some really, really complicated and potentially lethal strings. So there is that. So I will put a link below and we'll take a look to see where Roche Pharmaceutical and the other pharmaceutical company that I was reading about are located, because I'm pretty sure the other one also, interestingly enough, turns out to be in Switzerland that she was going to on this trip. Okay, and just for fun, I pulled up her progression and her solar arc for October 14th, which is a couple days into this trip. So remember, her progressed planets, she's got all her progressed planets down here in Virgo Libra, right? And we know transiting Neptune is absolutely all over those progressed planets, which is really interfering in her ability to see clearly, which she didn't have such an easy time with before this. This is just more of what's already there. Her progressed moon, or I'm sorry, her solar arc moon during this trip, right? Because the solar arc is very specific to days, is absolutely activating this Neptune opposition to those progressed planets. So this whole trip, there's, I would say there are a couple of things happening. One, there's a feeling of vulnerability and or helplessness, like there's just no way to stop or defend yourself against whatever you're dealing with, so you kind of have to go with the flow. Because that moon in Pisces is not a strong position. It's a fish out of water sort of placement. The solar arc moon conjuncting, transiting Neptune, opposing those progressed, I know, right? Progressed planets, especially coming out of the 12th house in this chart, her chart is absolutely a lot of backroom shady stuff. There's a whole lot more going on here than meets the eye. So again, I tell you again, this is not just about fundraising. There are debts that need to be paid here, and she is being called to her master to answer for something, and also to get instruction on what to do next. Because this moon, right, with Neptune against all those progressed planets, she's in a position of weakness. So she has no way to defy orders or to push back against something, which makes all kinds of sense given the professional suicide she's committing right now, right? So there has to be a force greater than her personal professional ambitions that is driving this train for her to do this to herself. I could be wrong. I'm just saying human nature doesn't change that much in the course of millennia. All right. Now, Mars, her solar arc Mars, right, is at the time of this right there on top of her ascendant. Now, solar arc Mars would have been about 2 days earlier, so that's going to be October 12th. So around October 11th or 12th, solar arc Mars would have been on her ascendant. So solar arc Mars on the ascendant is a cutting. Now also remember, she's got Aries on the 7th house, which is partnerships and other people and open enemies, right? And competitors. So the first house is I and me. The 7th house is you and they. So this 7th house ruler moving on to her ascendant right here, October 11th, 12th-ish, give or take a day, right? Absolutely indicates that there's confrontation occurring. This is because Mars is not a diplomatic, nice, fluffy planet. Mars is a you, kid, get here right now. Whew, Mars, right? Because Mars is the warrior. So it's a call to action. So that 7th house ruler on her ascendant would have been a call to action for her in no uncertain terms. So I don't think she wanted to go to Europe. I think she was compelled to go to Europe. And that's not good. We don't like it when our senators are being, well, basically on a leash and under a whip by other people, because singular individuals with that much influence over policymakers don't care about the rest of us because they're not affected by these things. So there's that. Okay. Get rid of that. What? No. Okay. All right. Now, let's see, her Jupiter, progressed Jupiter. Yes, her progressed Jupiter, I'm sorry, her solar arc Jupiter is right here on the midheaven. And again, benefit, protection, support, goodies, goodie bags, being spoiled with material things and resources are absolutely on board at this time. So there's a lot of material benefit that would have come out of this trip. And if you look, her progressed sun is right here conjuncting Mars in the 11th house. And progressed sun conjuncting Mars gives us a boatload of confidence above and beyond what we normally have. So there's potential for a lot of hubris or arrogance in our decision making at this time, which coupled with her poor decision making or perception, her limited perception, and it's Neptune, it's not good. She's not thinking clearly, and she's literally only seeing the upsides of whatever situation she finds herself in, for herself, of course. All right, now, this is, on this side, this is her natal chart, and these planets on the outside are the planets for her solar return, or her personal year ahead, starting from birthday to birthday. So I'm going to take this, and to look at these a little bit easier, I've got the actual, this is just the solar return without her personal planets in it. So, and reading solar returns are a little complicated and a little time consuming. So we're literally going to do a brief scan of this. So if I miss stuff, it's because I literally don't have enough time to really get into this. But what I did find were some very, very interesting things. So the first thing is on her solar return, her natal angles are coming back to their original placements. It's not exact by degree, but it's very, very close. That's all you need. So when the angles come back to their placements in a solar return, this makes it a very personally significant year. And again, she may think that she's, got it all under control and it's coming up, fluffy bunnies and roses, but this is not necessarily, this will not end the way she thinks it will. Okay, so when you look at a solar return, we're looking at what planets are coming to the angle. So right here, we know that her sun and the midheaven are coming back to their positions at the top of the chart. So she's going to be very prominent and very visible in whatever field of activity she finds herself in. And yes, Sirree Bob, she has been very prominent and very visible in her sphere of influence and her role as a senator. Note that we hear very little about Manchin, who's just as horrible, maybe worse, than Sinema, because he's got a whole family dynasty of pharma ties and coal and things that are detrimental to physical health of people who need drugs because they won't bring those prices down. His daughter raised EpiPen prices, as well as coal, which he knows is damaging the environment, and coal jobs have been replaced by robotics. So it's not like the people in West Virginia benefit from maintaining coal industry. Yada yada. But Mr. Manchin on his yacht, we hear very little about. Sinema, on the other hand, because of her solar return and her behaviors, with that sun midheaven coming back to its original position, she's definitely front and center in terms of visibility for everybody. Now, the thing about it is she could have easily been front and center for all the right things. But her character, again, this goes back to character. Her character has chosen a specific course of action that has led her down this path, which means that she's front and center, but she's front and center for being notorious for all the wrong things. So this is where things get weird with astrology, and some things we can't predict, because ultimately your character defines your behaviors. Okay, well, character and circumstances. Now, in her solar return, what you're also going to see is she's got a clustering here, Moon, Venus, and Mars in or around, let's just right here. So it's going to be in that 11th house. And I want to talk about that because that's pretty important. So this clustering is going to sit down in her 11th house. Now, the 11th house, it's a tricky house. So some of the houses are a little harder to delineate. Let me come back to that. Let me come back to that. What do we else got here? Neptune. Oh, right. This is the other thing. Also, in her solar return, she's got a Moon-Saturn conjunction. So her solar return Saturn is on her natal moon. So this is a time of accountability and reckoning. This is not a happy time, nor was it supposed to be. Now, when a solar return Saturn crosses your moon, typically this is a very heavy, serious time, because we could find ourselves in positions where we need to take responsibility for things or other people, or we are burdened with obligations we didn't know we had to have. There are a lot of constraints and limitations that are put on us, like shackles, like prison shackles or like a straitjacket. There's a real limitation in our options and our choices when solar return Saturn comes to our moon. And it very, very deeply affects us personally. So it may, on the surface from out here, because again, we don't live with her and we don't travel with her, so we only have bits and pieces of information. It may look like she's flying high like a jet setter, but that solar return Saturn on her moon is telling a very, very different story. And she may find herself, remember that spider web with that vertex in Jupiter, she may find herself with the walls closing in on her and her ability to make choices and move becoming more and more narrow and restricted. And her responsibilities and obligations to other people becoming bigger and bigger and bigger. So the question, of course, is whose who is she being responsible to and obligated to, and whose walls are closing in on her, right? We don't know because we don't have that information. Now, with that said, also to remember, she carries that Moon-Saturn opposition in her own chart with transiting Saturn, that solar return Saturn here, involving that Moon-Saturn opposition. You can bet your sweet bippy that this is not a happy time for her. And more importantly, all the unpleasantness that comes with having a Moon-Saturn opposition. Remember, she damps down on feelings. She's not a sentimental, empathetic person. All of that is coming to the surface because Saturn is also penalties, right? Along with teaching you lessons and giving you what you've earned, Saturn is also penalties, right? And restrictions and limitations. So this solar return Saturn involving her personal Moon-Saturn opposition would indicate that this is a very, and also because her personal angles coming to the angles again, this is a very critical year that has a lot to do with self-assessment and accountability. Holding yourself accountable, other people holding you accountable, and also taking a really long, hard, unforgiving, unflinching look at yourself. So if she's not doing it yet, she's still got a whole solar return year, birthday to birthday, to get through this. And she will. She will have no choice. Now, the other things that I thought was interesting, let me just kind of get through this real quick. So, yeah, you know what? I want to come back to this. So let's keep an eye on this right here, and I'm going to come back to that because I think this is related to here. So when we look at just the solar return without her natal chart involved, there are some interesting things happening. So also too, in the solar return, she's carrying, right, this Venus and Mars opposing Saturn. So literally this year, even if things were going well and she's doing all the right things, she would still feel like she doesn't have a friend in the world. Unfortunately, she's doing all the wrong things, and I promise you she doesn't have a friend in the world. This is when you have this aspect, Venus, Mars, and Saturn, it's an extremely lonely period of time. I would not be surprised if her husband is not discussing divorce. Now, whether they actually get divorced or not, I don't think it'll happen this year, but I think discussions of divorce may also be occurring at this time. There are a lot of separations in her personal, intimate life that are happening. So that is difficult, to say the least. Now, at the same time, Uranus, which we have had at 14 Taurus all this time, well, Uranus has been in Taurus, right? Now it's at 14. Uranus will set up a T-square to that Venus-Mars-Saturn opposition in the solar return. So what that promises us are moments where she will have unexpected, unpredicted breaks in her relationship. So there's a whole lot of stuff that's literally going to come out of left field at her that she's not going to see coming. So this is the kind of thing like where you come home and your significant other, you go shopping, you have dinner, you go to watch some TV. They say, I'm going to go to the bedroom and read a book. And the next, you walk in an hour later and they've been packing your suitcase. Oh, I'm sorry. Did I forget to mention? I'm leaving you. like that kind of stuff, right? That is very much this Uranus, Venus, Mars, Saturn, T-square. It's not happy, manageable, or predictable. And it's hurtful. It's just hurtful. So she's really getting hammered. She's going to get hammered 6 ways to Sunday. There are a lot of relationships that are going to break, very deeply meaningful personal relationships that are going to break and be lost permanently at this time. And, since she clearly hasn't been investing in strong relationships prior to now, she's not going to have anything left to fall back on. So I wouldn't want to be her at this time. Now, this T-square, if you look right here, the Neptune ascendant midpoint is at 14 Scorpio. So the midpoint for Neptune and the ascendant is involved in this T-square, which sets up a grand cross, but we don't use it as a grand cross. And this involvement of Neptune and the ascendant, remember, Neptune doesn't see things clearly, and the ascendant is us, the great I am. So this further emphasizes and reinforces this business about literally things coming out of a blind spot at her. So there are going to be some serious rifts and breaks in deep, very important personal relationships that will literally just be gone, that just end, like just torn away. That will be very distressing for her. So Jesus, I do not want to be here this year. All right. And the thing about it is when you're looking at solar transition and stuff, like these things are going to happen. People are born, people die, people move, people get married, people do all sorts of things in the course of their lifetime. We can't stop these events from happening, but what we can do is try to minimize the amount of destructive impact that these things might have on us by investing in our relationships through right action. And listen, it's easier said than done. I know. I'm the world's worst Buddhist these days. But, you know, when you're looking at the stuff, especially if you're talking to somebody else about their chart, don't alarm people. You don't piss on people's dreams, and you don't alarm people unnecessarily. So if you're going to go through these things, you're going to go through these things. The idea is that if you know ahead of time these things are happening, we can try to minimize the negative or destructive impact of these situations by fortifying things that will sustain us through the hard times. I'm just saying, there's your astro tip for the day. Okay, now here's what I thought was interesting, right? Now she's got a Jupiter-Uranus midpoint at 14 Leo. That 14 Leo Jupiter-Uranus midpoint is with that Venus-Mars in the solar return, which pulls in that Saturn by opposition and that Uranus by T-square, right? And again, there's this thing going on, this Neptune ascendant thing. And I know this all sounds like Greek, right? But to me, because Jupiter and Uranus is about risk-taking, right? And also has a lot to do with gambling. So she's certainly gambling and doing a lot of risk-taking with her career, I tell you what. But I think it's more than that. So with Venus and Mars here and Saturn, I think, and Uranus there, I think that she may actually have, and this Neptune and ascendant, like not seeing things clearly, being in her own little la-la land, I think Miss Sinema may actually have gambling debts. I really do. So we'll see. We will see. But I suspect, based on this, there is the very real possibility that she has gotten herself into trouble financially with gambling debts, or some type of speculative whatever. But it's definitely a gamble risk sort of thing, and she has caught the short end of it. And now, because all this Saturn's going on, it is time to pay that debt. So where Bannon has to be held accountable and answer to his masters about promises he's made and not delivered on, and or debts he's incurred along the way. His are long-term debts. Hers have a lot more to do with Jupiter and Uranus involved, right? And Neptune. This would appear to be some misjudgment, poor judgment, and debts that are incurred quickly, right? So like huge shopping bills, gambling, losses, on racetracks, whatever. In speculative investment with stocks, I don't know how that works, but apparently you can make a lot and lose a lot in the course of a couple of hours if you invest in speculative stocks. But it's that kind of a thing. Now, if that is the case, and I could be wrong, I'm just putting it out there because I'm guessing as much as everybody else is at this point. If that is the case, that makes all kinds of sense for this 11th house Mars and these solar return planets sitting in your 11th house, because the 11th house also has to do, because it's the opposite of the 5th, which is the 5th house is the house of speculation and gambling. The 11th house is the house of unexpected circumstances, right? Unpredictable events. So it is entirely possible that there are a whole lot of events in Kyrsten Sinema's life that are converging unexpectedly that no one could have predicted. Talk about strokes of bad luck, all at the same time. So if she's been involved in any high risk or speculative ventures, these things are coming to a crash this week as we speak, this week that she's in Europe. And these things may all tie together as far as her inexplicable behavior until now, and also this sudden vacation to Europe, when Senate's on break and she should be doing actual work to clean up her reputation with her constituents. So look for the possibility of gambling debts, right? The incurring of sudden debt, which typically is what you get with gambling and speculation. If it is not that, it could be just bad, literally bad luck, bad strokes of luck, and circumstances changing on a dime that really put her behind the eight ball. Um, in terms of, well, a lot of things. But her personal relationships are definitely taking a nosedive, and she's going to lose some very important ones at the same time. And while this is happening, feeling like she's not got a friend in the world, which, had she done things differently, she would have still had friends in her corner. But right now, as things have played out with her and her behaviors, she literally does not have a friend in her corner. She has people who have bought her services and that she is obligated to, but these things come at a cost, because with her, that Jupiter Taurus vertex Taurus conjunct in the 8th house, these things come with a price, and it's like a spider web. You get in there and you get the thing that you think you want, and then realize you can't get out of it, and you are now the meal. So I want to feel bad for her, but I can't. I just can't. So we'll see. We'll see. Keep an eye on the space. Let's see what's going on. But ultimately, I think that a lot of the motivation for her has to do with speculative debts, also possibly called gambling, that she has incurred, that someone is helping to pay off for her, or that she's trying to pay off, and also being beholden to very specific parties who have provided material and financial benefit to her. However, it's Jupiter vertex in Taurus in the 8th house in her chart that's being activated, because she's also at that stage of life, which also means that these things are coming with monumental strings, like a spider web. She's going to realize soon enough that she's gotten caught in and can never get out of. Which would explain why she can't tell people what it is that she doesn't like about the bill, or what she doesn't actually want, because her owners, her handlers, are, giving her one set of instruction, or vague, whatever, and she's trying to figure out how to make this fit so that it sells, as it were, or at least doesn't sound like she's owned by somebody. Boy, I tell you. Okay, so this is a lunar return, and this is just a snapshot of the month. And I generally don't do a lot with lunar returns, because there's plenty there otherwise. You could go down the rabbit hole with astrology charts and be there for decades, just poring over one person's chart and timing of events. So with a lunar return, it's going to run from one lunation to the next. Whenever the moon is at the position of the natal moon until the next time it happens a month later is the window of time you're working with in a lunar return. So her lunar return for this particular period began September 16th. So this runs from September 16th all the way over until October-ish, which I believe is October 11th is when that lunar return ends. And that is the day Ms. Sinema jumped on a plane, or the day after Ms. Sinema jumped on a plane and flew to Europe for unknown reasons that nobody can explain, except we now know this more than likely has to do with Roche Pharmaceuticals and whatever pharmaceutical company is also out in Switzerland, and her being owned by some people. So she had to go answer to her owners. I'm guessing. Cough, cough. I'm guessing. All right. So in the lunar return, one of the things that we're seeing is she's got, right, this Mercury-Pluto square. So this whole time from September 16th until October 11th, which we've definitely seen in the headlines, has been a flashpoint of controversy and pushback in terms of communication. So everything has been rife with deeper, more sinister meaning, right? So there's only a little bit of information coming out of the top, but we know, we can all sense it, right? That there is definitely much bigger, deeper things afoot in here. So there's that. Now the lunar return also has that Moon-Saturn conjunction together in the lunar return from September 16th to October 11th. So this has been a very sobering time for her, and not a good time. So typically when you've got a Moon-Saturn conjunction in a lunar return, those 25 to 30 days that this lunar return is in effect, it's almost honestly kind of a depressing time. It's not great. So this has not been great for her. So just before she jumped on that plane and flew to Europe, she was under a lot of pressure, and there were a whole lot of things that were not feeling very supportive of her, which we saw in the headlines, but also too, there may be more going on that we're not privy to. Now, on the right side, this is our natal chart over here. In the lunar return, Mercury is squaring her natal sun. and her natal Mercury and her natal midheaven. So absolutely, her leadership and her, well, her owners, um, and her career and her public image and her reputation, all of these things have been called into question at this time from September 16th to October 11th. So she's literally been under the gun during all this because this Pluto is going to be here. So let me just put these in here for you. So this Mercury-Pluto square right here translates over here, Mercury's right there, as a T-square involving her 10th house planets. So there's a lot more hidden agenda happening here than is being revealed, and clearly we are all aware of it. We just don't know what the details are. So there's no confusion about what Ms. Sinema wants. There's no confusion about her behaviors or why she's doing what she's doing. The confusion is who is directing this and where is the hiccup between what she's being told or required to do, to sing for her supper, as it were, versus what she's able to say. Because remember, we talked about that moon in Aquarius, right? This moon in Aquarius of hers it's not good at lying. It's not good at lying. All this Cancer is good at keeping secrets, but that moon in Aquarius is not good at lying. So if you corner her, right, or you back her in a corner, she won't lie. She'll find some way around answering you, right? Because it's not instinctive or natural for her to think on her feet fast enough to lie at the snap of a finger. So some of the issues that we may have been seeing in this clamping down of the jaw and refusing to give any information may have to do with the fact that she struggles with lying and can't think of a cover story fast enough that makes sense for what she's being required to do versus what she knows is the right thing to do versus what people are going to understand and not vilify her for even more. So there you go. And yes, this is in fact your Senator Kyrsten Sinema, and it is not Halloween because you know, right? And listen, I'm okay with people dressing the way they want, but I also think that you should dress for your job. And listen, folks, I came from the punk rock generation with the safety pins, the mohawks, and the oh my God, right? It's punk rock and the whole like neon dayglow, oh my God, Madonna era, right? So I'm okay with people being really flamboyant and colorful and creative with the way they dress, but also too, dress for your job. This is not how senators are supposed to dress, unless they have some kind of arrested development. They still think they're 14. Anyway, there you go. So this has been the video about Kyrsten Sinema, and this is Down to Earth Astrology and Prime Girl Wellness with Ms. Jenny, your astrologer. If you enjoyed this video, please give me feedback and give it a thumbs up, and or comment if you have an opinion or you've got something to share. Definitely look in the description box for more information, and we will keep, all of us across the nation will certainly keep an eye on things as they develop with this woman. If you'd like to keep or get notifications of new videos as they come up, make sure you remember to subscribe, and please by all means share this video with somebody if you think they might find some value or entertainment in it. All right, you guys be awesome, and we'll talk to you later.